Worked in the family business for 14 years, but my father handed it over to my golden boy brother and his rich, spoiled fiancée instead of me. Then he begged me for help when they left him after his heart attack. My name is Jacob, and I want to share with you the story of our family business. This isn't just about money and furniture, it's more about my brother, my father, and me. Let's start from the beginning. It all began with my grandfather, who opened a small furniture workshop. By the time I was a child, it had already grown into a significant operation run by my father, Richard. I always knew I would become part of this story. As soon as I could hold tools, my father began taking me to the shop. It was our shared endeavor, our world. My younger brother Ryan took a different path. He went away to study business administration while I stayed to help my father. Although Ryan and I are different, I always thought we were on the same team. Then Emily came into Ryan's life. She was one of those people accustomed to luxury, bright, charismatic, and very smart. Honestly, I found it hard to understand her, but Ryan was happy, and that was what mattered. When Ryan returned from his studies, he brought a lot of new ideas about how we needed to change things. My father was thrilled, but I felt that tension was starting to build between my years on the shop floor and his fresh ideas. At first glance, everything seemed smooth. Ryan brought innovations, and my father was happy the business was keeping up with the times. But it wasn't that simple. Ryan wanted to implement all sorts of technologies, talking about digitizing production. The ideas were good, but our factory wasn't Silicon Valley. Here, everything is done the old-fashioned way, and many workers are used to manual labor. Some of them have been with us longer than I've been alive. These changes began to cause dissatisfaction. And then Emily stepped in. She was smart, no doubt, but somewhat disconnected from the realities of our business. She started dealing with suppliers, promising the moon, but ended up making deals that complicated our lives. For example, she switched to new material suppliers, cheaper, yes, but the quality dropped, and our craftsmen were shocked by what they had to work with. Arguments began. I tried to explain to Ryan and Emily that we needed to balance the old and the new, but they were convinced they knew best. I sensed my father was beginning to understand something was amiss, but he didn't want to interfere because Ryan was his favorite. This situation really started to stress me out. Ryan and I had always gotten along, but now there was friction between us. I felt I needed to do something to preserve what my grandfather and father had built, but how? I didn't want to clash with my own brother. It became even more complicated when I realized my father had fully sided with Ryan. One day, when we were all gathered to discuss the future of the factory, he outright said he saw Ryan at the helm. It was like a cold shower for me. We were sitting in his office, me, Ryan, Emily, and my father. Everything seemed fine, discussing strategy, but then my father suddenly announced it was time for Ryan to take on more responsibility. He said Ryan had studied for this, was young, and had fresh ideas. I couldn't believe my ears. All my years of work, everything I had invested, seemed to mean nothing. My father spoke about handing over management, and I felt like I was boiling inside. To give you an idea, I never specifically asked for anything to be handed to me, but I honestly expected my efforts to be respected, to be given a chance to show what I could do. And then, this turn of events. Ryan, of course, was on cloud nine. He was beaming. He thanked our father, promising to excel. Emily was thrilled too, likely anticipating her role in the whole story. And I just sat there in silence. What could I say? Argue with my father? Create drama right there? After that meeting, I felt disconnected from the business. It was a strange feeling, like I was no longer part of the team, even though I had spent almost my entire life there. It was unbearable. And you know what's the strangest part? I started to doubt whether my father really understood what was happening. Maybe he just wanted the best for the business, but his decision was slowly tearing apart both the business and our family. The first thing Ryan decided to do was completely overhaul the logistics, supposedly to make everything more efficient. He hired some consultants who promised the moon. These guys started implementing their ultramodern warehouse and delivery management systems, but it turned out to be a total disaster. The warehouse became such a mess that we couldn't find the necessary materials on time. As a result, delivery deadlines were missed, and customers began to complain. Then Emily decided we needed a new marketing approach. "Let's make everything more stylish and trendy," she said. We revamped the website and launched a ton of ads on social media. That would have been fine, but she chose a style, kind of anime-like, that didn't suit our audience at all. Our furniture is classic, high quality, and they started promoting it like some trendy startup. In the end, we spent a lot of money with no effect. Personal issues didn't stay out of it either. One day, Ryan decided we needed to upgrade the production equipment. He bought new machines and put the old ones up for sale. But the new machines arrived defective, and we couldn't get them working quickly. This led to production halts, and the craftsmen were in shock. Many had worked on the old machines for decades, and the new ones were so packed with electronics that production simply stopped. It took time to train people and fix the faulty machines. In trying to make everything quick and impressive, Ryan and Emily began to lose control. I tried not to interfere, but it was unbearable to watch our years of effort and hard work go down the drain because of ill-considered decisions. It was becoming increasingly difficult for me to stay detached, having invested so much time and energy into this project. Watching it fail was unbearable. Things worsened when it became clear that my father, despite all common sense, was fully supporting Ryan and Emily, even with all the problems they were creating. Ryan and Emily also signed questionable contracts that began to undermine our reputation due to poor delivery and low-quality materials. One evening, when the complaints became too loud to ignore, I decided it was time to discuss everything as a family. We gathered in my father's office. I started by trying to explain how important it was to maintain the quality of our products and that our customers valued us for our durability and reliability. However, my father and Ryan didn't take my words seriously. My father wasn't even fazed. He supported Ryan, saying all these changes were investments in the future and that we just needed to endure the initial difficulties. "Everything will settle down, and we'll reach a new level," he confidently declared. Emily added that all the innovations would eventually pay off and that we should be ready for temporary setbacks in exchange for big profits. I tried to argue, saying we risked losing everything, including the reputation we had built over the years. But the more I spoke, the clearer it became that my father and Ryan saw my words as an attack rather than an attempt to save the situation. "You just don't see the big picture like Ryan and I do. You need to keep up with the times, but you're trying to work by old standards," said my father. Ryan nodded, adding that they were doing everything possible to adapt the business to new market realities. That evening ended in complete disappointment. I felt like a wall had come between us. My father and Ryan were on one side, determined to move forward with their plans, while I was left entirely alone in my attempts to bring some common sense to our management. It became difficult for me to be around Ryan and Emily. Every time I walked into the office, I felt the tension rising. Ryan started avoiding conversations with me unless it was strictly about work. And Emily, she began looking at me differently, as if I were enemy number one. The hardest part was seeing how my father reacted to all of this. He had always tried to maintain peace in the family, but now, it seemed he had chosen Ryan and Emily's side. Every time I tried to bring up our problems or suggest something, he just brushed me off. "Jake, Ryan knows what he's doing. Give him a chance." Days went by, and I felt more and more like an outsider in my own home. I started spending more time in the workshop because, at least there, people treated me like family. The craftsmen I had worked alongside for years also felt the tension and often expressed their support for me. "Jake, we're with you," said Mike, the head craftsman, whenever we discussed another one of Ryan's ridiculous ideas for reconfiguring the shop. It kept me going but also highlighted the growing chasm between me and my family. One evening, when we all gathered for dinner, I tried once more to talk about the business, but Ryan quickly changed the subject, and my father backed him up. That was the moment I truly realized I was no longer part of this team. My family, whom I loved and was willing to do anything for, was now on a path that seemed to have no return. After all those arguments and misunderstandings, what I feared the most happened. Our business started incurring losses. Not just small losses, but huge, colossal ones. In the last quarter, we lost so much money that it could put an end to our entire history. I remember it clearly. That morning, just as we were about to discuss the financial report, Ryan and Emily tried to explain to my father that these were just temporary setbacks and that things would soon improve. But I saw my father pale with every passing minute. When he saw the numbers, his face changed. He stood up to say something and suddenly clutched his chest. He could barely get a few words out before collapsing to the floor. It was a heart attack. The stress, the worries, the endless arguments, and now these losses, all took a toll on his health. Ryan and I immediately called an ambulance, and they took him to the hospital. I couldn't believe things had gotten this bad. At the hospital, while my father was in the ICU, a serious conflict broke out between me and Ryan. I couldn't hold back and said everything I thought, accusing him and Emily of making reckless decisions and pushing for innovations without considering reality, leading us to catastrophe. I said they had not only sunk the business, but also nearly killed our father. Ryan exploded. He yelled that I didn't understand anything about running a business, that I was just getting in the way. Emily backed him up, and they ended up telling me that I was no longer welcome in their home or their business. Yes, they straight up told me to leave. In that moment, I realized that my family, my home, everything I knew and loved, had turned against me. So there I was, outside, with my heart breaking from pain and anger, sitting on the steps of the hospital, realizing that everything I valued had crumbled. And it was all because of ambitions that had become more important than family ties and common sense. While my father was in the hospital, I tried to reach out to him, but Ryan and Emily put up a wall between us. They convinced him that it was better for me to stay away, saying my presence only added to the stress. And my father, weakened and exhausted, agreed with them. It felt like a punch to the gut. Over the next few weeks, I tried to get my life back on track, but it was hard to focus on anything knowing that my family had rejected me. I started looking for a new job, but my heart wasn't in it. All I wanted was to figure out how to fix everything, but I couldn't find any answers. One day, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that the business was still losing money and that Ryan and Emily were planning major layoffs. It was like confirmation that all my fears were justified. They really weren't managing, and the business my family had built over decades was sinking. After hearing this news, I decided to talk to my father, despite all the prohibitions. I went to the hospital and finally saw him. He looked weak, but when he saw me, there was a spark in his eyes, maybe a spark of understanding or regret, I don't know. We talked for only a few minutes. But in those minutes, my father managed to say, "I'm sorry, I thought they could handle it." Those were probably the hardest words I had ever heard from him. It's been a few months since I was out of the family business, and I slowly started to learn how to live a new life. I worked temporary jobs, applied for permanent positions, and met with friends who helped me stay sane through all of this. Then one evening, my father called me. His voice was weak and tired. He said that Ryan and Emily had left. They just up and left, leaving him alone with a collapsing business and a mountain of debt. They couldn't handle the pressure and the losses and decided to start a new life and a new business, leaving chaos behind. My father asked me to come back and help him. "Jacob, I need your help. I don't know what to do," he said, and it sounded so sincere that I couldn't ignore his plea. It wasn't easy to accept his call. Everything in me resisted. I thought about all the grievances, the betrayal, how they pushed me away when I tried to help. But at the same time, this was my father, the man who raised me, who gave me everything he could, and I couldn't abandon him. So I packed my things and went home. When I walked into that old office, where we had so many arguments with Ryan and my father, I felt a heaviness in my heart. But I saw the relief in my father's eyes when I arrived. We spent the whole night going through the finances and planning what to do next. It was tough, but at the same time, I felt like I was doing the right thing. I didn't know if we could save anything, but I was there for my father. The first few weeks were rough. We analyzed every figure in the reports, tried to find ways to cut costs without compromising the quality of our products. I reconnected with our old clients, explaining the situation and pleading for their patience. Many of them had known me since I was a kid, and that helped. My father, though weak, also got involved in the work. Slowly but surely, we began to see improvements. The account started to balance out, and orders started coming back. We even managed to rehire some of the old workers that Ryan and Emily had let go. Oh yes, I forgot to mention Ryan and Emily. After they left, we didn't hear much about them for a long time. It turns out they tried to start a new life in another city and even attempted to start their own business, but from what I hear, it didn't work out. Rumor has it that Emily went back to her parents, who helped them financially, but when the money ran out and their new project failed, they broke up. Ryan tried to reach out to me a few times, but honestly, after everything that happened, it was hard for me to open up to dialogue. The last I heard, Ryan got a job at a small company where he's working in marketing.